in my first speech, I spent a lot of time talking about the arguments for why we should have refugees in the country and the arguments against why we should have refugees in the country. Now, one important thing to realize is sometimes when we talk so much about a problem or an issue, and we look at all the statistics, and we look at the data, and we like visualize everything, eventually we get to the point where we stop actually thinking about what we're actually talking about. So let's take a moment and actually talk about what this subject is. So in regards to refugees coming into the country, one important thing to realize is that these refugees are actually people, which is something that like we can sometimes tend to forget on occasion. So let me start with why I'm interested in this subject. So over this past spring break, I went on a trip to Greece. And so for those of you who don't know, Greece is one of the first countries that a lot of refugees come into. Whether like coming out of Syria or Afghanistan, things like that. Greece is like the first place that people typically come into. So there's tons and tons of refugees in Greece. So while I was at Greece, I went to this one refugee camp where I met a little friend, and this friend's name was Maddie. So the very adorable child right there in the middle, in like the dark navy shirt, that's Maddie. I met Maddie while I was doing face painting with the little kids that were there at the refugee camp. And I thought to myself, like, well, I'm not really a very good artist, but that's okay, I'll go ahead and do some face painting. So this little boy came up to me and he sat down and he pointed to this picture of like this army man, and like he had like this camo face, and that's what he wanted his face to look like. So in my best artistic ability, I tried to paint his face just like the little guy in the picture. Admittedly, it wasn't a fantastically done artistic design because I'm not very artistic, but I was like, well, he's a little kid, like he won't even notice, it'll all work out. He did notice. He picked up a little mirror, looked himself in the mirror, and looked up at me and said, oh, no good. No good. And I was like, oh, like it's okay, like don't worry about it. I can redo it. I'll make it better. He's like, oh, no good. He just looked at me with this sad little face, just completely disappointed in what I had done. And I had gone there to try to help people, and so like that wasn't really my goal, to make this child sad. And so in one last little cry of desperation, I was like, well, don't worry. I mean, maybe you could paint my face. And he said, no. He looked up, he picked up this little paintbrush, and he said, okay. And he started to paint my face. So here's a picture of him painting my face. And he was such a little perfectionist that every time he would paint my face, he didn't think it was good enough, so he'd wipe it all off and then do it again. Basically, my face was like this tainted yellow, brown, purple color for like the rest of the day because of him taking it on and off. But that's Maddie, and so Maddie wasn't able to say my name. I don't even know if like Maddie is the correct pronunciation of his name, but he decided to call me my friend. That's what he called me. So this is little Maddie, and he and his family live in an airport, and it's an abandoned airport in the middle of Athens, Greece. And they live there with, I'm not even sure like exactly how many people live there, but I know there's over 175 children alone that live in this airport. So it's quite a big endeavor. One thing that people tend to forget about when it comes to refugees is that it's not just young men, even though there are a lot of men that are coming into the country, it's also women and children, and there are a lot of children that are coming into the country. So Maddie lives with his dad and his little sister, and they're together in their little family. They're in the airport, and their hope, like many other people that are refugees that are trying to get to another country, is to eventually go to Germany. Germany is one of the top places for refugees because they have a really stable economy, and they're very welcoming to refugees and letting them in. So that's kind of like the dream for a refugee. Like there's this little joke that a refugee goes to heaven and he ends up in heaven, and they're like, well, welcome to heaven. And he's like, oh man, I was trying to get to Germany. Because Germany has like such an appeal to a refugee that other countries like America tend to not necessarily have. And I'll get more into that a little bit later in my discussion. So, you know, like Maddie isn't the only child. There's, as as I mentioned before, like in the one refugee camp, there was 175 kids alone. These are other camps and other places all throughout Athens where there was children as well. And so, like, as I mentioned before, statistics, we can't really ignore them forever and ever, so let's go ahead and look at some statistics for the heck of it. So, 65.3 million people are forcibly displaced worldwide. 21.3 million of those people are refugees. Stateless people, there's 10 million, and refugees that have been resettled are only 107,100 since 2015. So, as compared to the amount of refugees that there are and the amount of them that have actually been able to find homes, it's relatively small. Now, the homes that they have been able to find, 12% are in the Americas, but most of them are really more in the Middle East, North Africa, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, and other areas like that, because those areas tend to be a little bit more welcoming. So the top hosting countries, at the very top we see Turkey at 1.5 million, and a little further down we see Jordan all the way up at 664 and 100 million, or not million, but like people that they're allowing into the country. So then we come to America. So let's remember, Jordan was all the way up in like the 600,000s, which is a relatively small country considering, and they're not even a very stable country in and of themselves. So let's think about our wonderful country of America. So where do you think America falls in that category? So as of 2017 fiscal year, America has let in, drum roll please, only 39,089 refugees, which, relatively speaking, is not a very high number. While I was in Greece, I actually was approached by several different people, some people that were refugees themselves and others that were working to help refugees. And one of those people was like, they were from an organization from Spain. And they were like in Spain, we're already letting in like so many thousands of people and we're such a small country and we can barely like keep up with this. What is wrong with America? Like why will America not let people in? Like what is the thing that they won't do this for? Like why? So let's talk about that for a little bit. So there's many different arguments that come up when it comes to why we shouldn't let refugees into the country, but probably like the two most prevalent that you're gonna hear is that refugees would be a drain on resources. So that's the first one. And then the other argument would be that they pose a security threat. So first, to the drain on resources, there would be definitely some amount of drain of resources when it comes to bringing refugees into the country. Bringing any amount of people into the country would potentially drain resources, but at the same time, there is evidence that refugees would provide economic benefit to both America and to other countries around the nation. A lot of times people don't realize, but most of the refugees that are coming in are going to be on the younger side. So social programs and other things that might normally be a part of, like the drain would not be a part of what's going on with refugees because of that, because they would be less likely to be using a lot of those social services. So this argument that there would be a drain, because there would be some amount of a drain, but the drain isn't really projected in the most accurate sense of like what actually would be happening. So the most prevalent and the biggest argument when it comes to refugees would be that that they would be a security threat to America. So my first point on that, there's actually a lack of evidence that there would be an actual terrorist threat in America. According to Kathleen Newland at the Migration Policy Institute, refugee resettlement is the least likely route for a potential terrorist. Of the 745,000 refugees that have been resettled since September 11th, 2001, only 2 of those were Iraqis who had been arrested on terrorist charges, but they were only arrested and they were never actually convicted. So the evidence that refugees would pose a terrorist threat on America is not really in there. So the second thing that we have to realize with this is that with every action comes an equal and opposite effect. So most people, when they take this problem into consideration, they only think of what will happen if we let refugees into the country. But But they don't think about what will happen if we don't let refugees into the country. Or if, when this is examined, it's only examined from the standpoint of what will happen to those refugees if we don't allow that to happen. But one thing that I realized throughout my trip to Greece was that there actually is a potential impact of a security threat by not allowing refugees into the country. You have this entire generation of refugees who grow up hearing that there's countries like Germany, countries like Greece that want them. They are a part of that country and they're wanted in that country and they can go to that country because that country cares about them. But the refugees that I talked to, they would specifically, and not talk about this in like some sort of theoretical up in the air, but this was specific to themselves, is they would say, America doesn't want me. I'm not wanted in America. I can't come to America because America doesn't want refugees. Or refugees are not wanted there. They didn't know why. They didn't know why America didn't care about them, but they knew that they were not wanted in America. So you have this entire generation of people that were displaced from their homes that now have this negative sentiment towards America, which could actually potentially lead to some sort of threat to America's national security in the future. After interviewing over 300 refugees, Wendy Perlman of the Washington News Post wrote, quote, Trump has accused Syrian refugees of links to terrorism, declaring that they are definitely, in many cases, ISIS-aligned. But Syrian refugees are themselves fleeing a terror of state violence, war, persecution, and extremism, such as the Islamic State. Moreover, the historical record shows that there's no refugee has ever carried out an act of terror against act of terror on U.S. soil. The majority of extremists in the United States charged with terror since 2011 have been native-born. So, because the evidence does not show that this threat that is normally associated with refugees is actually a threat, and because these refugees are people that actually need a place to live, and because not letting them in has the possibility of creating a negative sentiment towards the United States, which could possibly create further security threats in the future, that is why I believe we should allow refugees into the United States.